Hello, welcome to the Lessons of Vietnam. My name is Bill Dixon, North Carolina Vietnam Veterans Incorporated. It's Lessons of Vietnam. Tonight's show is going to be Vietnam and its contrast. We're going to talk a little bit about the differences people who served in Vietnam is from in the field to back in the base, well, as we used to say, in the rear with the gear. As we do this, we're in competition tonight. We've had severe storms around. When I left home, we didn't have any power. And of course, tonight we're also up against the State Carolina basketball game. So hopefully they have power for that. If you have an opportunity tonight, as we go through our show, and you want to call in and make your comments or a question or whatever you wanted to say, just call us at 919-518-9773. Or even better yet, go to your computer and go to Computers 2K. That's K as in Kilo Voice. That's on Skype. And tune in and ask your questions and be part of the show. What we're going to be talking about again is a contrast. You know, as a Vietnam vet, when we see other Vietnam vets, wherever we are, out in restaurants or whatever, we see that hat, the first question we ask them is, what year were you in Vietnam? The next question it's going to be, where were you? And the next question to that is who you were with. Because what year you were in Vietnam, where you were stationed while you were in Vietnam, and your job means your story was unique and different every time. It's amazing the differences because of the way the war was fought, the facilities, where you were as far as whether you were in the jungle, swamps, up in the mountains, on the river, or whatever. It's all different. But there's going to be two common denominators that all Vietnam vets are going to give you. When that plane door opens up and that smell and that humidity walks in, all Vietnam vets I've ever met have remembered that same thing, the smells and the heat and humidity of Vietnam. They're very unique, to say the least. Now, let's talk about next is how we got to Vietnam. When the first group going to Vietnam did go as units and it went on ships. They had trained together originally as whole units, trained all through basic training and advanced training, got on a ship and went to Vietnam, got off the ships and went to and set up their bases and so forth. But as soldiers in their groups started getting wounded or being replaced and come home, then we started going over to Vietnam by airplanes and by individuals. Now, what am I talking about, an individual? As you went through basic training in AIT or whatever your advanced individual training was, and you were assigned to Vietnam. So then you went to wherever you caught the plane from and got on a plane. As you can see there from the picture that's up on the screen, that is guys arriving in Vietnam. You can see they're wearing khaki uniforms. You don't see any weapons, gear of any kind whatsoever. That's how you went to Vietnam. You were on a plane full of strangers going off to a war that you didn't know anything about. And that's how we ended up mostly with replacements and so forth on the war. This picture we just had was 9th Replacement, which was right outside of Long Binh, which was right outside of Bien Hoa Air Base, 20 miles north of Saigon. But as you can see, that's kind of a meat warehouse. You stayed there, and they found all kinds of busy work for you until you ended up where you were going to be. Now, what's the difference between coming home from other wars? In World War I, II, and Korea, returning troops came home on a ship with the men they had fought with because they were there for the duration, and it took three weeks to a month or whatever to come home. So they had a chance to talk with their buddies and get readjusted a little bit to life, not in combat, to a normal life and so forth, because they had that time to talk with their friends and so forth. But the Vietnam troops, you could be out in the jungle fighting, helicopter pick you up, and within 24 hours you could be at home sitting down with mom and daddy at the table having dinner. And you still have not, you may you go from out with the uniform, but you hadn't had a bath in a couple of weeks. Uniform about rotted off of you, and 24 hours to 36 hours later, you're at home. And you didn't have a chance to reacclimate yourself to normal life or work with your friends and talk to your friends, because all your friends who stayed home, they didn't understand. Some of them didn't even know you were gone. Now, I want to read this part to you. This is from a Vietnam veteran who was wounded. And let me read it to you. I don't like to read off because you can read it yourself, but I want to read this one. I realized I would have to start over. None was the price I had paid to go to college. My life would never be the same. I had used my skills to become a shake and bake sergeant in the Vietnam War. They had a special school that you could go, and in 90 days you became a sergeant because they kept having sergeants get shot so much in Vietnam. I had done my best. The little boy who had loved to play with his plastic toys and soldiers to draw pictures of warriors had become one. Now this boy couldn't stand war. The thought of it made him sick to his stomach. Silently, I didn't want anyone to hear me because soldiers aren't supposed to cry. And that's trying to adjust to coming home. The next picture is in World War II. You notice there in 1945, the soldiers came home. There were parades. The famous the sailor who's getting the kiss from the strange woman in Times Square, or 1970 when we came home. If you notice in the background there, the protesters and so forth, where they actually had told us when we came home, don't wear your uniform because the war protesters and other people are there calling you baby killers and throwing human waste on you and everything else. So that was a difference as you're coming home, and the contrast there, that's the reason so many Vietnam vets haven't been able to talk about it for a long, long time. Now let's talk about being in Vietnam. The Vietnam is divided into 4 different areas of responsibility. If you see up there the DMZ is a demilitarized zone. That was the line between North Vietnam, the communist, and South Vietnam, the constitutional group. And right up down below that, you see I Corps. That was, and you see a little red arrow there, that's where the line of I Corps was. That was basically most of the soldiers up in there, not all of them were the Marines, Quezon, Chulai, and so forth, but there was a lot of Army guys there too, but that was, I Corps was a good part of the, now, I Corps was some of the central highlands and then also the mountains of Vietnam in that area. Then we come down to 2 Corps, which had some absolutely fantastic beaches there with Cam Ranh Bay, Nha Trang, and those places have fantastic beaches, was 2 Corps. And around Saigon, we had 3 Corps, which is where I was when I was serving over there. And then you go down, which was in the edge, it was kind of flat land. It was right at the edge of, not quite, some of the delta was down in 3 Corps, but when you got down in the 4 Corps, you almost need to be a duck because it was nothing but swamps and ice paddies and rivers and everything else. And it's a small country, but the terrain is just so different. You go from the swamps to the mountains and everything in between. It's amazing how it can change, and because of the terrain changing, the weather has a tendency to change. Now, it's always hot and wet no matter where you are, but if you're up in I Corps, it got kind of chilly at night. I know down where I was in 3 Corps, it got down to 65 one night, like I was going to freeze to death. It got down, in fact, this past year, it snowed in northern Vietnam, right on the China-Belize border. So some beautiful pictures there. Now, let's talk about some of the contrasts. This was Cam Ranh Bay, which you could see in 2 Corps, I believe, when I had the picture up. Yes, it was 2 Corps, right above the sign there. You can see Cam Ranh Bay. Had beautiful beaches. Here, the soldiers celebrating on the beach, having a good time, partying. Now, some of these guys are stationed at Cam Ranh Bay. There was a lot of Navy and Air Force there, not so much Army, but Navy and Air Force, which may be why there's so many people enjoying the beach. We also had China Beach, which was up around Da Nang area, which was right at the edge of I Corps. Or down in around 3 Corps, we had a place called Vung Tau. And I know that Vung Tau, we used to always joke that the American soldier got a 3-day R&R there, that's rest and relaxation, but it was also used by the Viet Cong as an R&R facility, depending on what side of the fence you were on. but Vung Tau was one of the nice beaches and so forth there. So you could be on the beach, or you could be humping it out in the mountains here. You see the mountain range. And I can tell you, there is no easy walking in mountains like that and so forth, plus watching out to keep somebody from shooting and so forth. It's tough to carry an 80-pound pack and climb those mountains. Or you could be in the Central Highlands there, where you had the hills, but you had more trees and bushes and so forth to get through, plus also good places for the enemy to hide. Or you could be down in the Delta with all this leeches and mosquitoes and everything else you can think of. You never get dry. One of the nice things about being in the Delta would be to have a dry pair of socks every now and then. Immersion foot, trench rot, anything you can think of. We never wore, if you were down in the Delta, I don't know about the guys up north, but if you were down in the Delta there, you didn't wear underwear because you would be chapped and just all kinds of rashes and so forth because you were always wet. There was no place to be dry at all. That's not even the monsoon season. So the living conditions varied depending on where you were in country, your assignment and so forth. It's such like if you were back at Long Bend, you could get up in the morning, you could get out of your bunk. Now, bunk, that was something that a lot of the guys out in the field never saw was a bunk. You could go take a shower, maybe even a hot shower, put on your clean underwear, put on a fresh starch uniform, eat a hot breakfast, and go to your office or job. Almost just like being in stateside. We were required where I was every day to get up in what we call break starch, put on a clean starch uniform and spit shine boots, and go to work or whatever. Or, as you see the company clerk here, working in his office, nice and clean starch uniform and so forth. Or this super soldier right here is in a drafting room, did drafting. That's me. If you notice that I have gained 2 people since I came home, but that's me as a private in my office there, which I didn't spend a whole lot of time later on in, but that's the kind of life you had when you were back in. This office was also air conditioning. Right next to it, you see behind my head a building, part of the building sticking out. That was a full bird colonel that was in the office, and his wasn't air conditioning, but you can't do drafting and maps and so forth if your arm sticks to the paper. So being back in the base camps or large camps like Long Bend, Cameron Bay, Da Nang, and all those were different. Now let's just talk about the contrast here. You wake up in the morning where you've been laying on the ground, trying to find a spot that a stick or rock or whatever is not sticking in your back. Roll up your poncho liner. You've probably been where you've been laying with the mosquitoes, ants. Mosquitoes in Vietnam were kind of like, they were kind of like hummingbirds. I really think they had call letters on their tails, as big as they were. Leeches, snakes. Vietnam is interesting. It grows little people and big everything else. Big spiders, millipede. I saw a millipede about 2 feet long. A little bitty, nice little millipede. You can get up, roll up your poncho liner, open a can of sea rations. Now, sea rations were left over from World War II. Now, if you open up the ham and eggs, chances are they were green and tasted like they should be green. And eat your ham and eggs. As I said, it was left over from Korea and World War II. Then you didn't worry about putting on a fresh pair of underwear because you didn't have any and didn't wear it anyway. You put on what's left of your uniform, which may be shorts or ragged, so forth. You might, whenever you go back to base camps, what you would do is go find someone who had either rotated back home or got wounded and find a pair of pants or shirt or whatever that wasn't too raggy, and that's how you got to change your clothes quite often over in Vietnam if you were in the field. So you go weeks without a chance of taking a bath or whatever. Now you're ready to go to work. As I mentioned a while ago, going to an office. Now you're ready, almost. First of all, you got to make sure your rifle's nice and clean. You got to check it out. Your grenades. Then you slip on that 80-pound pack because everything you own, everything you're going to eat, wear, shoot, ammunition, grenades. You might be out with a group, but you may carry your own ammunition, but you may also be carrying a band or 2 of the machine guns ammunition, because if you come up under fire, you want that machine gun not to run out of ammunition. At the same time, you may be carrying some grenades, extra grenades or something for the M79 grenade launcher. And now you're going to spend the rest of the day humping it through the jungles, hacking your way through. I just never understood this part. You don't want to go down a trail because the enemy might be waiting for you to ambush you on the trail. So then you go into jungles with machetes and hack the bushes and so forth, which is not fun. You don't get very far, but they know you're coming from miles away. Or you could be out in the rice paddies, and the rice paddies also got ice, lots of interesting so forth floating around in it. So that would be a normal day for a guy out in the field. You can see the contrast between being back in and back out. Speaking of sea rations, here's a picture of me in 1967. I'm in the jungle on Thanksgiving Day. This is me eating my Thanksgiving dinner, which happens to be turkey. It was one of the better sea rations. Sitting next to me is a sergeant, and I've actually got another picture of him a little bit later, and an armored personnel carrier. But there we are out in the jungle, sweating a whole lot. Or you could be down in the Delta area where you're in the mud, like these guys are. And you got to realize this. Think about this. These guys won't get a bath unless they cross the stream for maybe a week, 2 weeks at a time. They're going to have to wear that mud and so forth. But you can understand, looking at the picture, why you have a problem with your uniforms, which will rot off of you and you're not wearing underwear and so forth. This is the sergeant I just told you about. He's sitting on the back door of an armored personnel carrier. Armored personnel carrier, or APC, was a track vehicle, and most people rode on top. As you can see, inside it was the kind of storage stuff. You didn't want to ride inside in case you ran over a mine or something, so everybody rode up on top. And if you want to see some soldiers move fast, this particular day, when I took this picture, we hit about a 6-foot-tall anthill. And those ants are, well, they're about the size of a quarter, and they took a hunk of meat. And we all got off that armored personnel carrier real quick because they were eating us up. I believe the driver even come out through that little hole in the front, which I'll show you a little bit later. Now, going back to living facilities also are different depending on what year were you there. When I first got to Vietnam, even though I was at Long Binh, my hooch was a tent. And later on, we had the buildings built. They were built tin roofs. You build them up with slats on the side, then you had wire mesh over the sides of that, so you get some airflow through there. Then you put either barrels of sand or water and then sandbags all around that. But this is back here, this picture happens to be Cam Ranh Bay. And where I was at Long Binh had 55,000 men and women in it, and it wasn't close to the beach, but had a lot of men and women. Now, if you look at this next picture, it's like stateside. They actually had buses taking people to work at Long Binh. While you see these buildings here, that's Second Field Forces or United States Army Republic of Vietnam headquarters, used to be headquarters there. And those guys worked in air-conditioned buildings, 12-hour days, 7 days a week we worked, but actually had buses to come by and pick you up, which I thought was phenomenal. And if you were at Long Binh, you also, now this was not there when I was there, or if nobody told me about it anyway, but this is United States Army Republic of Vietnam personnel, their own private pool, which was probably over close to the Second Field Forces, where they got to go swimming. I never saw one like that at all. I don't know what I would go, had a chance to go anyway, but that was the pool they put in there. The next one is, this is where the generals lived, and these houses were all scattered all through in this area of Long Binh, right kind of in the middle, so it would be a little safer. The generals stayed in those, and I think some colonels and so forth. And you see next to them, I took a lot of pictures through the windshield, as you can see. Right next to the windshield there, you can see a bunker in case of attack and so forth. But this is where the generals lived. And the next picture is not a very good picture, but that's the trailer park. That's where all the colonels lived, in those nice air-conditioning trailers and so forth at Long Binh. Now, can't tell you about the other places because I didn't get to see any of the big bases there. And the next picture is the United States Army Republic of Vietnam headquarters, or Second Field Forces headquarters. As you can see, got Papa San out there sweeping the road. That's highly air-conditioned buildings. They had some nice displays and so forth, but that's where all the generals worked. A friend of mine was a colonel, And during the Tet Offensive of '68, when the ammo dump blew up, he was sitting in one of those upstairs offices, and the explosion blew an air conditioning vent loose, and it hit him in the head. And they wanted to put him in for a Purple Heart, but he refused it for being wounded during the Battle of Tet by getting hit by an air conditioning register. But that's USAV headquarters. Now the next picture was what the hooches looked like over there, and being in base camp was like Long Bend was just like being almost back home, because we had to do things like paint the building. That's me and a friend of mine painting the building. We even had to paint the roofs. But that's hooches for the 159 Engineer Group at Long Bend, headquarters company. Screen door, and you can see the latches, how the boards turn on the sides like that, so that you can get some air, but then on the side you see some reeds hanging down, and behind the reeds was the wall up, and then it was wire, a mesh above that, thin wire, trying to keep some airflow but keep the mosquitoes out. The next picture is inside our hooch there. As you can see, it wasn't exactly always kept nice and clean and so forth. But squatting down in the back towards that door back there, you can't hardly see it. I don't know whether you can see it at all. But there's Mama San back there. She's probably polishing boots or whatever. Her job was to keep our uniforms clean for us, starch them, polish our boots, sweep the floor every now and then and so forth. And it's a friend of mine laying on his bunk, posing for his picture there. Now, even at base camps, there was a problem. Now, Cameron Bay probably had these, but Long Bend and so forth, with the 55,000 men and women, we didn't have any flush toilets. You can see behind there was outhouses, and they have a door that opens up on the back. And every day, some special soldier, cream of the crop, got to pull those barrels out and burn them. And you can see a soldier there burning the crap out of the crap. You put diesel fuel in there and you burn it. It wasn't the best job in the world, but I could think of worse jobs. And the next picture is out close to the road and so forth, so you could run out of the office and take care of business. This is what we basically call a piss tube. You see a piece of corrugated metal in front that between you and the road, so it's about waist high. So if you felt the need to take a leak, rather than go all the way and find the outhouse, you basically went and found the piss tube and took your business there. And it wasn't unusual to be standing there while some nurses rode by in a Jeep, and you just wave and they keep right on going and so forth. So, in the next picture, this is the way it is out in the field. This is a young man who's taking care of business out in the field. Not exactly, this is an outhouse without walls. This is definitely an outhouse. As you can see, he's got some boards there, and he's sitting on taking care of business there out in the boonies and so forth. So even in base camps out there where they didn't have facilities, somebody had to take it out and burn it and so forth. Now, you could be living in a tent like this at a base camp. Hopefully you didn't get mortared, because you can see they don't have any sandbags or anything around them, so forth. But you got a tent like that. You can see a radio receiver there, an antenna. Or you could be at a fire support base like the next picture, kind of living in the ground. You can see all those sandbags and so forth there. Or you could be living out in the field and living in a poncho liner tent. You can see the guy sleeping on the ground and keeping out of the weather. That's a poncho he slept under. Evidently him and the buddies right the area. And that's why, if you notice, there's no floor to that. That means you're always good for the scorpions and the mosquitoes and the snakes, and then some more snakes and all the other bugs and so forth that crawl all over you. But that's the poncho tent. Next picture is also a fire base. As you can see, they have pushed up the berms. And if you look along about where you see little puffs of smoke, that's where the guns are. So the idea of a fire base, they wanted to have those so often. So when you went out on patrol, you never got out of distance, if you could help it, from the fire base. And before you went, you already had plotted the places that they knew you were going to be. So if you came under attack and you need to call in artillery, they know about where you were going to be, and then you call in, we're back basically where they were. So you never want to get beyond where the fire bases could fire the guns. You know, you knew how far you could be and so forth. So you never want to go beyond the fire base ranges. This is a headquarters tent in an LZ or landing zone in 1967. You can see in there he's got his office and his maps and so forth. Or you could be living in the ground like these guys, put sandbags up and live in the ground. And I don't know what they did there during the monsoon seasons, because they must have been sleeping in water, because I can't see what's going to stop the water from going in. Now, this guy has lost his roof. These other guys, as you see over there, have got their roof on them. And if you look, some of them looks like they're got their bathing suits on, chilling it for the day. They must have the day off. So that's kind of the living facilities you had, contrast between being in the base camps or being out in the field and so forth. As you see, it's quite a, depending on what year and where you were and so forth, how different it was. The next one we're going to look at is you could be doing a lot of different things. This is a guy, we call him a tunnel rat. They found a tunnel. His job is to take a flashlight, a pistol, and go down in the hole and see what he can find. Now, some of these tunnels had multi-levels. Some of them had hospitals. Some of them had barracks. They had kitchens where the smoke come out probably half a mile away. I mean, miles and miles of tunnels. And these guys had to be somewhat crazy. Normally, they were small guys, which I was always glad I was a big guy. Small guys would go down in the tunnels, which had a tendency also to be booby-trapped. They may have a snake tied down there, so when you drop down, the snake bites you, or a grenade, or even one of our own claymores. But the idea was you go down in these tunnels and look and see what's there. You may find a cache of weapons and ammunition and so forth. And the next picture is a guy going down into the tunnel. And then as you see right between his legs there's another hole going down a little bit deeper. But that could also have been an explosive, so forth. But that's a pretty good sized tunnel there. That's big enough for a regular man to go in. But you got to take that flashlight and that pistol and go down in there. And it makes sure sudden right-hand turns or left-hand turns or so forth. So even if you throw a grenade down, the grenade goes off, but when you got that right-hand turn there, it doesn't go into the other part. They were pretty ingenious with their tunnels and so forth. Or you could be down in the delta crossing a river. As you can see, you don't really get dry very often. Basically, you try to keep your weapon and your radio and so forth from getting wet. But that's when the leeches really like to find you. The leeches in Vietnam are interesting. They're a bit big. And I have been in areas down in the Delta like that where the entire ground was moving with them. They like the warm, soft, moist areas of your body. That's where you use between your knees and your waist. That's where they preferred going. You could be walking along and look down. You thought you'd been shot or something, didn't know anything about it. It was because a leech had drank your blood, excuse me for my southern there, drank your blood until he couldn't hold on any longer and he let go. And then your blood still runs because they put a anticoagulant, and when they bite you in their saliva, which keeps it bleeding. And I tell you what, as soon as you're sweat a little bit and that salt gets in there, you realize he's there. You can't pull these suckers off because if you do, you're probably going to leave the head, and down in the delta, you're going to end up almost instant infections and so forth. So you have to either use some bug repellent, or even better, one of your buddies take a cigarette or a match and put it on their butt and they let go. They won't kill you, but I tell you what, they can sure are yucky putting up with the leeches. And if any place was moist like that, you could be, or you could be out in the jungle with your the radio man like this guy is. Now, if you notice that sticking up in his back there, that's an antenna. That antenna is really good for the bad guys to know where the radio man is. And they know where the radio man is, that the officer in charge is going to be close by because he always wants to be with his radio. So the radio telephone operator right there is a good target. They like to shoot him really good. And most of the time, unless they were on the radio, they pulled that antenna down so it didn't stick up as much. But that man had to carry that 80-pound pack plus the radio. Probably was a Prick 25 radio most of us used, but interesting to Graham. The next picture, they're after a firefight, they're waiting for the helicopter to come in. This was 1968. The U.S. casualty rate reaches record high. American officials in Saigon reported an all-time high weekly rate of U.S. casualties, 543 killed that particular week, 2,547 wounded in the past 7 days of those times. And that was during the Tet Offensive when there was a lot going on and so forth. But they're waiting, the wounded there has been taken care of. Now they're waiting for the helicopter to come in. And again, it depends on where you are. If you were down in the Delta area where you had triple canopy jungle. Now, what is a triple canopy jungle? You had trees that were probably almost 100 feet tall. Then you had trees that were probably 70 feet tall. Then you had trees that were 30 and 50 feet tall. And it could rain and you may not even know it because it would take a while for that rain to filter through. But if you had a wounded guy and you had to get the helicopter to come in, they couldn't come in. So what they had to do was buy a jungle spreader and a basket, and they'd have to lower that basket from the helicopter down to pick up the wounded guy through the bushes and trees and so forth and get him out. But if you were up in the mountains and so forth, it was a little easier for them to get in. But the only problem was when the helicopter's coming in, the helicopter takes both hands and both feet to work the controls to keep them going around and around and around or doing it. Now just think about this. These guys are got to be crazy. They're coming in to pick up a wounded soldier. They're not armed at all. That helicopter pilot has to come in and land or almost land, and the bad guys say, okay, here's a good target. Now they're shooting at that guy. He has to sit there and not move, keep his hands still, keep his feet still, while bullets are bouncing off and coming through the plexiglass window and so forth, while they're bringing you the wounded. Even if they do it quickly, that's a long time to sit there and just be a live target while people are shooting at you. Those guys are phenomenal, and they would do just about anything to go in and pick up a wounded soldier and so forth. Now, this next picture, this is trying to figure out how we're going to cross this open field. You'd like to be able to have a place to hide, but I can tell you from a fact here that grass does not stop a whole lot of bullets. There's something about the grass that does not slow them down at all. We can hide it behind a tree and it's pretty good. You can hide it behind a rock, but it's hard to hide behind a blade of grass. So who wants to cross that open field first? Somebody gets to be the lucky guy to go across. As you can see the guy with the radio there, and there's that sergeant again with a white towel around his neck, which I thought was strange because most of them carried the green towels. We call that your go to hell rag because it kept the pack off your back, it kept something to wipe sweat with, whatever else you had to do with it. So they were very important to have. Now the next picture, you could be out one day and these guys are flying over you and they say, whoa, don't worry about it at all. What these guys are doing, they're spraying Agent Orange or Agent Blue or Agent Pink or Agent White. Now, most people know the word Agent Orange, but if you don't even know what that is, that was a defoliant we used to spray, or they used to spray on the jungles to kill the plants and so forth. Basically, the idea was to keep the communists from having a place to hide. One of the places that got started was going down the Delta rivers, like the Mekong River or whatever. The Viet Cong would build concrete bunkers alongside the river, and then it didn't take long for the bushes and so forth to grow over them. So as the boats were going up and down the river, patrol boats, swift boats, or whatever going up and down the river, or supply boats, the Viet Cong were in a nice concrete bunker shooting these guys, and even if you shot back, chances are they wouldn't hurt them in the bunker. So that's where they started spraying this Agent Orange. Now, most of the health problems we're coming up now are coming out with Agent Blue. Agent Orange has dioxin in it, but Agent Blue didn't have dioxin in it. Agent Blue was used to kill the rice paddies. If the Viet Cong or the communists couldn't feed their troops, then they had to quit fighting, so they came up with Agent Blue, which had arsenic in it, which killed the rice paddies. So if you, like I said a while ago, if you were walking along and you got shot at and you had to dive head first into a rice paddy, you found their fertilizer, which was the human waste or the arsenic. You didn't want to drink water out of the rice paddies by any chance. So that was spraying, and of course they always said it won't hurt you. There's guys who actually used to take those barrels and cut them in two and make a barbecue out of them. The next picture is we're out trying to do a survey I went out with the surveyors quite a bit in the jungle, which was almost impossible. This young man you see in the front was a good friend of mine. We called him Pineapple just because he was from Hawaii. The kid behind him, well, let's put it this way, he was not exactly going to win a intelligence contest at all. I think he was one of McNamara's 10,000. He was from South Georgia. Good kid, just didn't know a whole lot. But there we are out there with the 9th Infantry. Or you could be building a bridge. The 159 Engineer Group built the largest military engineer built bridge in Vietnam. There we are building a bridge. Basically, it almost fell down when they first got it through because, like anything else, a lot of politics there. They had the bridge up, but an I-beam, shaped like an eye, with those pieces on top have a tendency to wobble like this if you don't put stiffeners in. Well, they didn't have time to put stiffeners in because the general wanted to open up the bridge and he wanted to come and make a speech and tell how wonderful the bridge was, so they didn't put the stiffeners in. And the first time a tank convoy went across, it almost fell because it was doing like a snake, wiggling back and forth, since they finally stopped it and put the stiffeners in. And the next one is what we call a roam plow. Now, they took these out to clear the jungles away from around the base camp so you could have a fill of fire. You didn't want the vegetation and weeds and so forth to grow right up on top of your base camp because you couldn't see the bad guys until it was too late. These guys on roam plow had to have a lot of oomph about them because basically they on that roam plow out there sometimes pretty much, they got a few infantry guys out with them, but snipers and so forth. There at Long Bend, we had what's called peneprime, which is if you're going out where you see them paving a road, that tar they put all over the road, which gets all over your car before they're paving. We had barrels and barrels of that at Long Bend, and the bad guys shot 122 millimeter rockets in and had the peneprime burning and exploding for days. And these guys on roam plow had to go in there and get that hot burning tar and push it up into berms and put dirt all over it. And it took them 2 or 3 days, and the smoke was so thick you couldn't even see them in there with the roam plow. Or you could be building an underground bunker. We built this large underground bunker. The walls were about 4 foot thick. Underground, these are some of the support things and beams in it. This was right outside the entrance to the 2nd Field Forces headquarters I showed you a while ago, that nice pretty green buildings. We were building these bunkers, and I always thought that probably this thing was used today, but Long Bend today is a large industrial complex. I'm not certain if it's still used, but in 1968 when we were building it, it was awesome and large. So we had our own concrete plant, our own asphalt plant and so forth. Or speaking of asphalt, you could be out paving one of the roads. Now, if you notice this guy sitting on the paver, now it's about 100 degrees with probably 120% humidity, and he's sitting on the hot paver doing this. But if you also look, there's an M14 swinging up under his seat there. Because if you see all the bushes have been cut down there, even when he's paving road, he's apt to get shot at or sniper fire or whatever. But these guys went out there and worked hard every day, 7 days a week, 12-hour days. Or you could be out humping it through the jungle, and usually, now some of the infantry guys carried as many as 6 canteens at a time. Usually when I went out with the infantry guys, because I was an engineer and didn't know better, I only carried maybe 2, maybe 3 canteens, but sometimes you ran out of that water. So what you do is you find a nice stream like this, fairly clean, but you know it's got creepy crawlers in it. You know it's got every known disease to man. You know if you drink this water, it's going to kill you instantly. But the military and its infinite wisdom knew you're going to have this problem. So what you do is you fill up your canteens here, like I'm doing here. You fill up your canteens with this water. Try to keep as many creepy crawlers out as you can. Now you have a canteen full of brown, yucky water. It tastes like it would kill you, and it will. So in its own wisdom of the military, they give you iodine tablets. So you put 2 iodine tablets in your canteen, you shake it up real good. Now you have a canteen full of brown, yucky water that tastes like iodine, which is not that good, but it's drinkable. So what you would do then is you get mom, dad, wife, friend, or whatever to send you Kool-Aid. So then you put some Kool-Aid in there. So now you have, like grape was my one I liked, where you put that Kool-Aid in there and you shake it up. Now you have a purplish brown iodine grapey tasting water. It's drinkable, but it's not something exactly that you would actually want to go order in a restaurant or someplace. I know the first time that I had this problem was I was married 3 years when I went to Vietnam. My wife, bless her heart, still hadn't listened to me a whole lot. I've been married 51 years to this woman, and she's tolerated me, which is in something in its own. But she sent me Kool-Aid one day, and I put that in my canteen. In fact, it was this day, and I shook it up, and I took a big drink because I was thirsty. My head almost caved in. Oh, then I could not figure out what it was, and then I looked, and it was unsweetened Kool-Aid. It's kind of like drinking alum. If you get a chance, take some alum and put it in your mouth. It will pucker everything. And even as thirsty as I was, I couldn't spit. I couldn't hardly even talk for a while. And it was an interesting letter I wrote home after that. And I keep a bottle, a package of unsweetened grape Kool-Aid at home just in case I need it for educational purposes. But I haven't touched Kool-Aid since then, and probably never will. Another job you could be doing over in Vietnam, you could be doing a survey like this. Trying to decide where the road's going to be, shooting elevations and so forth. This guy was a good kid. The surveyors that I work with, they would drink a case of beer each every night. One day, this guy got the bends and hurting so bad in his stomach they had to medevac him out because he got dehydrated. He'd sweated out all the alcohol, which stinks, by the way, and it didn't have any liquid in, and he almost got heat stroke, so they had to send him out. Or you could be out in that armored personnel carrier I mentioned to you a while ago. This particular area down in 3 Corps, the ground was almost like sand. Being down at the beach here, it's sand, but after about 9 inches of that sand and soft ground was this gray clay. And it reminded me of Jell-O. You could just almost go up to it and shake it. It was just kind of shake. And we weren't supposed to have the armored personnel carriers out that day, but we did. The lieutenant decided he didn't want to walk that day, so we took him out, and then he had to call back in and tell the captain that he had stuck the armored personnel carrier. He didn't tell him that the other armored personnel carrier who came to get this one out also got stuck worse, because you couldn't even get that back door open on the other one. But we finally got him out. But the captain didn't even need a radio. You could hear him screaming at the lieutenant over the radio that you probably could hear him a mile away, at least. But that's the armored personnel carrier. There's the guy sticking his head up, the driver sticking his head up out of the driver's hole there. But that's the armored personnel carrier, APC. We were trying to figure out a while ago was M13 or something, huh? M113 was the armored personnel carrier there. Or you could be out in the Navy. You know, the Navy guys, a nice ship out in the ocean eating ice cream and air conditioning and so forth. No, you could be on a patrol boat river, PBR, or a swift boat out on the rivers. You remember a while ago I talked about the guys shooting you up and down the streams? Well, these guys, you could be out on the brown water Navy with these guys getting shot at and catching sampans. Or you could be, like this next picture, you could be delivering soldiers to a hot LZ. You could be flying into a hot LZ, dropping the soldiers off, and hopefully you don't get shot in the meantime. Or you could be picking up wounded. If you have a chance to go back and look at one of our past shows by Lonnie Connor, was an Air Force pararescue, and hear his story, how he got the Civil Star for a rescue that they did. But these helicopter guys, these parajumpers, were just phenomenal courage to try to help any wounded soldier they could do. And even the tanks had their problems. As you can see, this tank probably shouldn't be on that dirt road. See, Vietnam has basically two seasons, hot and wet and hot and dry. During the rainy season, it's not unusual for it to rain 12 inches in 24 hours. I mean, we're talking about rain. And I never understood how these guys with the tanks. And if you look at that turret where the bullets come out, right in front of that is a big spotlight. And it's like daytime. The only problem is when that spotlight's on, you can see the bad guys, but the bad guys can also see where you're coming from, which I always wondered about with these guys. And one of the jobs that I hated I'd rather burn crap than do this one, was filling up sandbags. You notice all these buildings, almost all of them had sandbags. And sometimes you're out in the field, you still filled up sandbags, but when you got ready to leave for the next day, you just emptied the sandbags out and went on about your business with the sandbags tied to your pack or whatever. But when you got set up at night, you had to dig them and fill them up again. But here you are filling up sandbags, and of course it always attracted the Vietnamese kids and so forth. I've had friends of mine who have been in firefights, and as soon as the firefights get over and kind of calm down a little bit, the baby son comes along with a bucket full of Coca-Colas wanting to sell you a Coke. And you're still trying to figure out where the bullet's been coming from. The next picture is this was when I went out that morning. This was a nice starched, fresh uniform with spit shine boots. As you can see, they're not exactly spit shine boots or nice and fresh. Mama Son I mentioned a while ago, she hated me because nobody in my barracks ever went out. Most of them spent right there in the company area, so they always had nice, clean uniforms and spit shine boots. When she got my uniform, she had to do so much work and spit shine my shoes that she used to call me all kinds of names in Vietnamese, which I didn't know all what they were. But also, if you look at right there next to where I'm standing is a rifle rack. Now, every soldier in that hooch had a rifle, but they were kept locked up in that rifle rack. Most of them, the year they were there, never took those rifles out. Now, during the dry season, they would turn pink and red because of the dirt and so forth. So if you came under attack or whatever there, you had to go find the sergeant or whoever had the keys and get the keys undone so you can get your rifle. Now, I went out quite a bit, so my rifle was usually kept clean and so forth, but the rest of them, I'm not certain they'd fire anyway. But that's the end of the barracks that they would not let you have. We used to have to stand guard duty inside the base with a rifle, but no clip with ammunition in it, just a rifle. Don't know what good it was supposed to do, but there. Or you could be like this guy driving a truck. See, just like here, you got. Well, we got 18 wheelers, most of what was loose in the house over there, calling surprise and so forth. And as you going on about in Vietnam, you had young guys on motorcycles we used to call cowboys. Now, these cowboys could come along on their little motorcycles and pull up behind a deuce and a half with a big heavy canvas on it. One of them get in the back, and then all his buddies will come up on their motorcycle, and he hands off stuff to them. They can almost empty a truck going down the road. These cowboys could. This happens to be a 3/4-ton truck here. It's a little truck, but you can be a truck driver over in Vietnam, just like here. Or I love this one. You can actually be out in the field and go see a dentist. Okay, I've got a picture here that all right, this was base camp firing those big guns. I'm sorry. As you can see, they're putting their hands over their ears. These guys had to work that gun 24 hours a day. Generally, most of the time they had to fire them at night because that's when we would go in to ambush the Viet Cong or the NVA and so forth. But they always had to be standby ready to fire those guns. They may fire just constantly, just as hard as they can go for an hour or two at a time. We got those hot casings coming out, put another one in and fire, and same just as fast as you can go because you got guys out in the field. So you could be doing that, and you can see the guys with the flak jackets on. I hated mine. It was heavy, steel plates in it. It was supposed to stop a ricochet or a bullet, but I don't think it was tested that much. But whenever possible, I didn't wear one because it was just so heavy. And the next picture is okay. Here, you're out in the boonies, surrounded by jungle and so forth, and you don't have time to go out to the dentist, so the dentist comes out and sees you. You know that's got to be really sterile right there out there doing that, getting a tooth full. Or,
like the nurse.
Huh?
Like the nurse.
Yeah.
Next to the nurse.
Yeah, he probably washed his hands last week. And you can see right off as a bunker to get underground. Or if you're really lucky, and you're out and you got some time, you can find a bomb crater and take a bath. I'm not certain how clean you get, but you find a nice bomb crater and you take a bath there.
What bomb did that?
Some of the 500-pound bombs would or what they call the daisy cutters, where they clear jungle, the jungle cutters. See, and sometimes for the helicopter would come in, they'd have the planes fly over and drop this huge bomb, which would just clear all the trees and everything out of the way. What it would normally do is explode before it hit the ground and cut the trees and stuff down. But this was a bomb crater. I saw some of them 10, 12 foot deep, but you get a chance to take a bath. What always got me was how the Viet Cong, being down in those tunnels, could live through this sort of stuff. And the next one, this is another good job you could have. One of my friends, Ron Fitzsimmons, who's also been on, this is a bird dog plane. The idea is you fly low and slow. And what you did was you were able to find the bad guys, because if you were flying low and slow, they'd shoot at you. When they shot at you, then you could take a rocket that you've got there and show where they are, and then you get out of the way, and the big planes come in and blow them up. But the only trouble is you got to fly low and slow to get them to shoot at you first. And hopefully they don't have a rocket or something to shoot at you. So that's another exciting job you could have out over there. All right, the next one. Now, if you can notice it or not, there's a man standing in that picture. He's got your back to you. People say all the time, do you shoot anybody when you're over there? Well, sometimes you're in jungle like that. You don't know whether you shot anybody or not because you don't see them. The bullets come flying by and snap by, and you know they're close by, but you don't see where they are. Now, I'm not certain how I can show you, but if you look right down here at the bottom, there's actually a survey tape. And if you look at the survey tape, there's a guy with his back to you kind of bending over right there, a little bit to the right of the, up right there is him. That's him right there. Nope. Yeah, right there. That's the man standing right there. We have walked all day long and never actually touched ground. We walked on roots over the water. Sergeant one day dropped his machete and went right on down in the water and never did get it back. But that's talking about being in some thick jungles and so forth. Now, what was even worse than that, if you go into elephant grass is somewhat like that, but it grows straight up, and it could be 8, 9, 10 feet tall, and it's like razor sharp. We always wore our shirts down because it would cut you all to pieces trying to cross through the elephant grass. And also, you could never see the bad guys and so forth. But here we are hacking our way through the jungle as it closes in behind you. And now, you could also enjoy the wildlife. They had tigers over there. This is a little one that they've killed and bringing in for everybody to see. They probably end up eating him. But some of the wildlife over there. In the next picture, you'll see some more of the wildlife. That little snake there. Vietnam had, I was told, it had 136 species of snakes. 130 of them are poisoned. The other 3 swallow you whole. This was probably a boa constrictor or an anaconda. And you can see the guy up front here is holding his head, and the rest of them are holding his body. The biggest one I ever saw was 14 feet. But so along with the bad guys and the legion and so forth, you had the wonderful wildlife and so forth. Now, when it comes time to go to church, if you're out in the field, the chaplains, every denominational chaplain would come out and do church service out in the field. You still had to have people out on guard duty so you wouldn't get shot. Or if you're back in the base camps, we built the nice churches back there so that people of all faiths could go to the church service and so forth. Now let's talk about what you did to have fun in Vietnam. First thing, was the most important fun, was mail call. You always wanted to get a letter from home, and here's the soldier writing a letter. You did that when you had a chance. And then you see the 2 girls to your right there. You went to see the bar girls. And what they would do, the bar girls' job was to get as much of your money as you could. So you go in there, and they would sit and talk with you and other things while you were sitting there. And what they would do, they want you to buy them a Saigon tea because they couldn't drink the beer, which was 33 beer that you see in the picture there. We always thought it was part of it was formaldehyde. But the idea was the girls would sit there and drink Saigon tea as long as you paid for it while you drank your beer. And the idea was to get as much money. But when you left, if they had drank as much as you did, then they couldn't do their next job because they were going right to the next GI. Once you stopped buying them Saigon tea, they went over to the next GI. But they would drink the Saigon tea, which was basically tea, while you drank the beer or whatever. And so writing letters was so important. The mail calls, whether you're getting mail or getting packages from home. Listen, if you got packages from home, then you were definitely #1 GI because all your buddies liked you and you usually shared it and so forth. But the next picture, there's some Boom Boom girls. I'm not going to go into a whole lot of explanation about what these girls did, but they kept the GIs entertained, those who partook and so forth. I was just telling Amnon, first time I ever went into town, got some pass and went into town. This little kid, about 5 years old, came up to me and said, "You boom boom my mother, she's a virgin." And basically he was a pimp for his own mother. And I mentioned a while ago about the cowboys. It was amazing to me. You could be riding down the road on a Jeep or a truck. Here comes one of those cowboys on his motorcycle with a couple of girls on the back. And they'll ride along right beside your Jeep and talk to you while you're driving down the road and proposition you to pull off the side of the road and visit one of their girls. It just never got used to that sort of stuff at all. But that was some of the entertainment available for the GIs who participated. You not believe that the diseases and so forth that were, well, it was interesting to see the guys who come back from the clinic and getting their penicillin shots and so forth. And here we are. As I mentioned a while ago, drinking the water wasn't all that good. So the liquid of choice for most of us in Vietnam was beer, except for my case, I don't like beer. But we used to buy a case of beer and take with us when we went out with the infantry guys and give it to them, and they'd hump it all day long. Now, you got to realize this beer has been sitting in that box at about 100 degrees, and the humidity is unbelievable. And listen, they're going to drink that beer just like it is, right there. There's no such thing as a cold beer, hardly. So you get your chance to get you a couple of beers there, eating out in the field. They delivered them out there. So that was another one of the entertainments and so forth and breaks. Any break you could get from the field, come in for a day or two to change to a fresher uniform, chance to rearm yourself, food, ammunition, and so forth. Yeah. Unwind from being out pulling. So you hump all day long, and then you pull ambushes all night long. Usually, if you're an ambush out there, you slept 2 hours on, 2 hours off during the night, but you didn't sleep a whole lot because it's amazing the noises that the jungle makes at night. You hear that rustling through the bushes. Is that one of those snakes? Is that a tiger? Or is that an enemy, a communist guy coming in to shoot you either way? So there's not a whole lot of sleep out there, but you hump it all day long in the heat with that pack, and you do ambush duty. So coming back for a day to unwind and relax a little bit is good, and drink a beer or two. Now, along with that, the next one, reading letters from home. This happens to be, my wife sent me some Christmas presents. This is the closest thing I had to Christmas there in my hooch. Her picture's hanging up on the wall back there. But getting a letter from home or getting a package was so much, so special. And I got one almost every day except during Tet. Then there was no mail for a while at all. One of the things we also did quite a bit, which you don't hear about, the next one, is GIs have always loved kids and so forth, and we work with the kids, go to the orphanages and help build buildings at the orphanage, build schools, clinics. The medics would always go into the villages and try to inoculate or take care of the children and old people of the villages and so forth. But you don't hear much about the GI taking care of the kids and so forth, but there's a Medigap program. But wherever we were, the kids always hung around because they wanted to see rations, they wanted the cigarettes, they love for you to give them a pack of cigarettes because they're going to smoke a few of them, but they're also going to trade those maybe for food or whatever. I've got pictures of kids smoking the cigarettes, just like the bad guys. And people always say, "Well, you're harming the kids." These kids didn't know whether they're going to be alive or dead tomorrow. They weren't worried about lung cancer or anything else. And cigarettes came with the C rations, but we spent time with the kids in orphanages whenever possible. I think Dick even mentioned that on the last show that he went into the orphanages sometime around Saigon where they had a lot of it and so forth. Or these guys are out in the field, but they're in a base camp in a fire base there, and they're waiting for the Bob Hope shows. You can see they're sitting on their helmets or they're sitting on their packs, waiting for Bob Hope show to come in 1967 in a place called Lake. You can see the airplanes in the back. The Bob Hope show was very special. These guys are waiting for them. Or you could be at Long Bend waiting for the Bob Hope show. As you can see, a little bit of difference and contrast between the uniforms and so forth. The guys you see in the blue are patients at 93rd Evac Hospital. And right in the middle of that, you'll see a young lady in a pink Aldi. Sitting next to her is Premier Key. He was the president of, right there. He was the president of Vietnam at one time. He was a fighter pilot, in Vietnam. He was quite a warrior and a dapper guy. Every time you ever saw him, he always had a beautiful woman with him. But he was there for the Bob Hope show. And that was about 100,000 people at this particular show for the Bob Hope at Long Bend. And you can see even the guys, most of the guys there have got nice clean uniforms and so forth on. People hanging from the poles and so forth. And one of my favorite stars here, Raquel Welch. When she walked out on stage with Bob Hope, I bet you $50,000 worth of film went out right off there because there were so many cameras clicking. When she walked out on stage and talked, and she danced and she sang, and she got a couple of GIs up there with her. But that's Raquel Welch and Bob Hope at the show. The insignia he has on his hat there looks like it's the 4th Infantry Division. I don't remember exactly which one it is, but that looks like the insignia there. He always, and wherever he went, he always had key cards, somebody out on a stand holding up cards so he could say where he was and make a couple of comments about the base or the officer or whatever. And he brought some really nice people with him and so forth. Or you could be out and have donut dollies. These young ladies were with the Red Cross. And they would send these young ladies out to entertain the troops, play games, maybe one of them could sing and play a guitar. They may play different games, board games or whatever, but they went out on a regular basis and saw and entertained the guys out there. Any chance to spend some time with a round-eyed girl was special. As you know, most of the Asians have eyes are slanted, so everybody wanted to see a round eye. And but these girls did a great job. They lived under bad conditions. They may be out like a camp like this and come under fire. The base may get mortared or rocketed or attacked or whatever, and they have to find a bunker or someplace to hide in, just like the other guys, unless they can get a chance to get out. And girls did a great job. And next we have, this is inside the hooch. We used to have a lot of parties inside hooches there, our barracks over there. It was interesting. We had a liquor card that you could buy a bottle of liquor, but we were not allowed to have liquor in the barracks. But you could buy it. So what you do is you buy some and then you have a big party and you drink it all up. Because if you didn't, a couple of days later, the sergeant would come along and do a surprise inspection and finish and take your bottle of liquor and take it with you. I know I bought a fifth of Chavis Regal, and I think I paid $4.50 for it. But there we are having a party in the barracks. The hairy guy was a barber in real life, and he used to cut our hair. The guy with his arm up on him worked with me in the office when I was there. He was his parents from Russia. And the guy in the green, I cannot remember his name or what he did. And then the two guys that are blurry, the blurriest one also worked in the office with me as a draftsman. But there we are having a party. And never got a chance to do this, but at Long Bend, they had a miniature golf course. My colonel had a trailer, and he put a full tennis court next to his trailer and then put lights on it so he could play all hours of the night. We're talking about, again, almost like base camp, but there were some guys off duty playing miniature golf or putt-putt. This next picture is, you remember the bridge that I showed you a while ago that we were building? Well, the general was so proud of his bridge, he threw a big party for all the officers and so forth. This is a model of the bridge in the officers' mess, and all the hors d'oeuvres and so forth for their party. They like to have, the colonels and officers love their parties with all the hors d'oeuvres and all the decorations and so forth. They would have a party for any excuse whatsoever. It was the first day of monsoon. It was the last day of monsoon. The sun came up. Whatever their excuse was, they were ready to have a party. Also, down at the NCO clubs, you had bands coming in almost 5 nights a week. Now, this one is kind of calm. We did have strip shows quite a bit come down. The girls never got naked, but they came close to it. But they had Filipinos, lots of Filipinos bands come in. If you have never really appreciated music until you heard "Rolling Through the River," sung by Filipinos. But there was some great shows there. We had those regular at Long Bend and other places. But you can see the guy blowing the saxophone. He is definitely sweating. And but they put on quite a show. But a lot of them. Once in a while we'd have an American come through and do the shows and so forth. Or we're past out of time, so I'm gonna cut it off. We'll finish up the next show. The next show, we're going to finish this up. We're going to talk a little bit about the things we've got coming along. The post-traumatic stress. I won't pay attention to the clock at all. I was too busy doing this, but we were doing a symposium at the History Museum on post-traumatic stress and how to get cured. And then in 1st of April, if you're anywhere in the area, you need to come in. We're going to be doing the Vietnam experience with the History Museum. We have a young man coming in doing a one-man show. Then we're going to do the Etchings in Stone play by Ron Harris about the Vietnam Memorial Wall. We're going to have helicopters, displays, vehicles, a little bit of anything that you ever thought about with Vietnam, and we invite you to come in. The tickets are free. The auditorium only holds 300 at a time, so if you want a ticket, give me a call if you're in the area. My number is 919-434-7345. The show is Friday night at 7 o'clock, Saturday night at 7 o'clock, and Sunday at 2 o'clock. So if you're going to order tickets, tell me how many tickets you need, your name, so you will have your will call, and which show you want to go. Now, I listen in Southern, so talk slow, and I may call you, and leave me your number if you would, because I may call you back and ask you how you spell your name. Appreciate you tuning in tonight. I hope you enjoyed the first part.
The dates again.
The date of the first of the one-man show is Wednesday, March 30th. April 1st, 2nd, and 3rd is the Vietnam experience with the play. And the post-traumatic stress symposium will be March 15th at the museum, Daniels Auditorium on Edenton Street in Raleigh. And we'll have quite a good panel there. If you know someone who has post-traumatic stress or may have post-traumatic stress, be sure to invite them to come in and to the symposium, and we'll see if we can get some help. And then the 23rd of April, we have another special show. We had a gentleman out of down around Wilmington who is a veteran service officer with the VBA, and he's going to be doing a follow-up show on Agent Orange and how it's affecting children and the grandchildren of people who went to Vietnam. We went to Vietnam and served and came home, and our children and our grandchildren and our great-children are being affected by the Agent Orange and other things there. I hope you have a good night, and be careful out there with the tornadoes.
You're tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. Our weekly lineup of call-in programs includes Computers 2K Now with Amnon Nissan, My Life, My Will with Gisela DiCarlo, The Tanya Love Show, Health Then with Debbie Bruck, Breaking Free with Marilyn Shannon, Triangle Be Well with Howard Jacobson, Lunch and Learn with Rabbi Yisrael Cutler, Lessons of Vietnam with NCVVI members, Parent Dome with Ryan Miller, Current Affairs with Amnon Nissan. And if you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section on nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by Atomos.com, makers of quality video recorders and converters, CarolinaApparel.com, and DeltaForce.net.